The night everything changed started like any other, except it didn't end that way. I was lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling of our shared apartment, listening to the sound of water running in the bathroom. My roommate Carter was taking one of his famously long showers, and I was trying not to think about the fact that we'd just spent the last 3 hours tangled up together on his bed, closer than we'd ever been before. My heart was still racing, my skin still tingling from where his fingers had traced absent patterns on my arm. But it was the moment right before he'd pulled away, the way his breath had hitched, the way his eyes had darkened with something I couldn't name, that kept replaying in my mind like a film I couldn't pause. And then he'd said it, four words that shattered everything I thought I understood about us. "We need to stop this." I didn't know what this was. I didn't know if he meant the physical closeness, the emotional intimacy, or the way we'd been dancing around something unnamed for months. All I knew was that something had shifted, and I wasn't sure either of us could go back to pretending we were just roommates anymore. Let me start from the beginning because none of this makes sense without context. My name is Ullivet Hayes and I'm 23 years old. I moved to Portland 6 months ago for a graphic design job at a small marketing firm, and I needed a place to live fast. That's how I found Carter Mitchell's ad on a roommate finder app. Looking for a chill roommate, preferably someone who doesn't mind a messy kitchen and occasional late-night gaming sessions. The rent was reasonable, the location was perfect, and when I showed up to see the place, Carter opened the door with an easy smile that made me feel instantly comfortable. He was tall, probably 6'2" to my 5'10", with dark brown hair that always looked slightly messy in that effortlessly attractive way, hazel eyes that seemed to shift between green and gold depending on the light, and the kind of athletic build that came from actually enjoying sports rather than grinding away at a gym. He wore a faded college t-shirt and joggers, and when he shook my hand, his grip was warm and firm. "Ullet, right? Come on in, man. Sorry about the mess. I wasn't expecting you until later." The apartment was a spacious two-bedroom with hardwood floors, large windows that let in plenty of natural light, and a lived-in comfort that immediately appealed to me. Carter showed me around, pointing out the shared bathroom, the surprisingly well-equipped kitchen despite his warning about messiness, and the living room with its massive TV and gaming setup. My room would be the smaller of the two bedrooms, but it had a great view of the street and enough space for my desk and art supplies. We sat down on his worn leather couch, and he grabbed two beers from the fridge without asking if I wanted one, just assumed we'd share a drink while we talked. That casual confidence, that easy warmth, that drew me in immediately. We talked for over an hour about everything from our jobs to our favorite bands to our completely opposite approaches to cooking. He was funny, self-deprecating, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. By the time I left, I'd already decided I wanted to live there. Not just because the apartment was great, but because Carter seemed like the kind of person who'd make coming home something to look forward to. I moved in 2 weeks later, and within a month, Carter and I had fallen into a rhythm that felt natural, like we'd been friends for years instead of weeks. We'd have breakfast together most mornings. He'd make terrible coffee that I'd pretend to enjoy while I made scrambled eggs that he'd actually devour. We'd come home from work around the same time and end up on the couch, talking about our days, our frustrations, our small victories. Weekend mornings meant sleeping in late, then wandering to the coffee shop down the street where Carter would order the same caramel macchiato every single time while I'd try something new each visit. We'd sit by the window, people watching and making up elaborate backstories for strangers passing by. He had this way of making everything feel lighter, like even the mundane act of grocery shopping could turn into an adventure when he'd challenge me to find the weirdest item in the store, or when he'd insist we needed to try some ridiculous new snack he'd seen advertised online. We started having movie nights every Friday, taking turns choosing films, and Carter had the worst taste in movies. He loved cheesy action flicks and disaster movies that were so bad they were almost good. I'd give him endless shit about it, and he'd just laugh and throw popcorn at me. But it was the small, quiet moments that meant the most. The way he'd leave a post-it note on the coffee maker with a terrible joke to make me smile on a Monday morning. The way he'd text me random memes during the day just because he thought I'd find them funny. The way he'd ask about my design projects with genuine interest, wanting to see my work even though he admitted he knew nothing about art. The way he'd remember little details, that I liked my tea with honey, that I had a standing call with my mom every Sunday evening, that I got anxious before big presentations at work. He was attentive in a way that felt rare, especially for a straight guy who probably had a dozen other friends and interests competing for his attention. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something started to shift in me. I'd find myself looking forward to coming home not just because our apartment was comfortable, but because Carter would be there. I'd catch myself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way he'd run his hand through his hair when he was concentrating on a game, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way his entire face lit up when he was excited about something. I told myself it was just appreciation for a good friend, that I was just grateful to have found such an easy living situation. I should probably mention that I'm gay. I've been out since college and it's never been a secret or something I've hidden. When Carter asked during that first apartment viewing if I had a girlfriend, I'd casually corrected him, "Buffriend actually. Well, ex-boyfriend now, that's part of why I'm moving." He nodded without missing a beat, said something like, "Cool man, sorry about the breakup," and that had been that. No awkwardness, no weird questions, no change in how he treated me. It was refreshing, honestly. I'd had straight roommates before who got uncomfortable or who'd made a big performative deal about how okay they were with it, and Carter was neither. He was just Carter, normal, friendly, unbothered. He'd ask about my dating life the same way I'd ask about his, with casual interest and the occasional teasing. He'd tell me about girls he was interested in, dates that went well or terribly, and I'd offer advice or commiserate depending on the situation. It felt balanced, equal, like we were just two friends navigating our 20s together. So when I started noticing the shift in my feelings, I shut it down immediately. This was textbook territory I'd promised myself I'd never enter again, catching feelings for a straight friend. I'd been there before in college, and it had ended with heartbreak and a ruined friendship that I still regretted years later. Carter was straight. He dated women exclusively, talked about women he found attractive, had never once indicated any interest in men. And more importantly, he was my roommate and my friend, and I wasn't about to fuck that up because my stupid heart couldn't distinguish between deep friendship and romantic feelings. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I ignored it. I pushed down the flutter in my chest when he leaned too close while showing me something on his phone. I rationalized away the warmth that spread through me when he'd clap a hand on my shoulder or pull me into one of his easy, casual hugs. I told myself that the reason I felt jealous when he went on dates was because I missed hanging out with him those evenings, not because I cared who he was spending time with. And for a while it worked. I dated other guys, went on apps, had a few short-lived situations that never quite went anywhere. Carter was supportive, asked about them, gave me space when I needed it. Everything was fine, we were fine until we weren't. The shift started about 3 months into living together, and it was so subtle at first that I almost missed it. Carter started touching me more, not in any inappropriate way, just more frequently. A hand on my lower back when he'd move past me in the kitchen. His knee pressing against mine when we sat on the couch. His fingers brushing my arm when he'd hand me something. At first, I thought I was imagining it, reading into innocent gestures because of my own misplaced feelings. But then I started noticing other things. The way his gaze would linger on me sometimes, like he was trying to figure something out. The way he'd find excuses to be in the same room as me even when he didn't need to be. The way our movie nights started extending later and later, neither of us wanting to be the first to call it and go to bed. One night we were watching some forgettable comedy, both of us sprawled on the couch with our legs tangled together in that careless way that had become normal for us. Carter was scrolling through his phone during a boring scene, and I was half watching the movie, half lost in my own thoughts. Then he shifted, adjusting his position, and suddenly his head was resting on my shoulder. It wasn't the first time we'd been physically close like this. We'd ended up in similar positions before during long movie marathons. But this time felt different. He didn't move away after a few minutes like he usually would. He stayed there, his breath warm against my neck, his hair tickling my jaw. My heart started hammering and I held perfectly still, afraid that if I moved, the moment would shatter. "You good?" he asked quietly, his voice slightly rough. "Yeah," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "You comfortable?" "Very," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We stayed like that for the rest of the movie, and when it ended, neither of us moved to turn off the TV or get up. We just sat there in the flickering light, not talking, barely breathing. Finally, Carter lifted his head, and when I turned to look at him, he was closer than I'd expected. Our faces were inches apart, and for one wild, impossible moment, I thought he might kiss me. His eyes dropped to my lips, then back up to meet my gaze, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read, something vulnerable and uncertain and maybe a little scared. But then he pulled back, cleared his throat, and stood up. "I should probably get to bed," he said, his voice slightly strained. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Yeah, of course," I said, trying to sound normal despite the fact that my pulse was racing and my thoughts were spinning. He gave me a small smile, almost apologetic, and disappeared into his room. I sat there for another 10 minutes trying to process what had just happened, or almost happened, or maybe hadn't happened at all. After that night, things got weirder. Carter started acting differently around me, and I couldn't figure out if I was reading too much into it or if something had genuinely changed between us. He'd be perfectly normal one moment, joking around, teasing me about burning toast, challenging me to a rematch in whatever game he'd beat me at, and then he'd suddenly go quiet, his expression distant, like he was working through some internal puzzle he couldn't solve. He'd catch me looking at him sometimes, and instead of making a joke about it like he normally would, he'd just hold my gaze for a beat too long before looking away. The physical contact increased too. He'd ruffle my hair when he passed by or pull me into side hugs for no apparent reason or rest his hand on my knee when we were sitting together. And then he'd seem to realize what he was doing and pull away quickly, like he'd touched something hot. It was confusing as hell and I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me wondered if he'd somehow figured out that I had feelings for him and was gently trying to let me down by creating distance. But that didn't match with the increased touching, the lingering looks, the way he seemed to seek out my company even more than before. One Saturday afternoon, everything came to head in the most unexpected way. Carter had gone for a run, something he did most weekends, and I was working on a freelance project at the dining table, lost in my design work with headphones on. I didn't hear him come back until he was standing right next to me, sweaty and breathing hard from his run, looking at my laptop screen over my shoulder. I pulled off my headphones, startled. "Jesus, you scared me." "Sorry," he said, but he didn't move away. He stayed there, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body, smell the mix of sweat and his cologne. "What are you working on?" I explained the project, a logo redesign for a local brewery, and he leaned in closer to get a better look, his hand coming to rest on the back of my chair. I was acutely aware of how close he was, of the way his breath was still coming in slightly heavy from his run, of the fact that he was standing there in just running shorts and a tank top that was clinging to his chest. "That's really good, man," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You're crazy talented, you know that." "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not finished yet, but—" "Elliot," he interrupted, and there was something in his tone that made me turn to look at him. He was staring at me with an intensity I'd never seen before, his hazel eyes dark and unreadable. "Yeah?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. He opened his mouth, closed it, seemed to struggle with something internal. I need to take a shower," he finally said, but he didn't move. We stayed like that for another moment, frozen, the air between us thick with something unspoken. Then he stepped back abruptly and headed toward the bathroom, leaving me sitting there trying to catch my breath and figure out what the hell was happening. I heard the shower turn on and I tried to go back to my work, but I couldn't concentrate. My hands were shaking slightly and my mind was racing with possibilities I didn't want to acknowledge. About 20 minutes later, Carter emerged from the bathroom in fresh clothes, his hair damp, looking more composed. He grabbed a water bottle from the fridge and sat down across from me at the table. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice serious. My stomach dropped. "Sure, what's up?" He was quiet for a moment, picking at the label on his water bottle, not meeting my eyes. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he finally said, "and I don't want to make things weird, but I feel like I need to know." "Okay," I said slowly, my heart hammering. Have you noticed things being different between us lately?" he asked, finally looking up at me. I didn't know how to answer that. On one hand, I could play dumb, pretend I hadn't noticed anything, maintain the safe distance of plausible deniability. On the other hand, Carter was clearly struggling with something, and maybe honesty was the only way forward. "Yeah," I admitted quietly. "I have." He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something for him. "Okay, good, I thought maybe I was going crazy." "You're not crazy," I said, and I meant it. "So what's going on?" He let out a long breath, ran his hand through his damp hair. "I don't know, man, that's the problem. I don't know what's going on, but something is different and I can't stop thinking about it." My chest tight. "Different how?" "With us," he said, gesturing between us. "The way we are together, the way I don't know how to explain it." I waited, barely breathing, while he struggled to find words. "I've never felt like this with a friend before," he finally said. "This close to someone. This comfortable, and lately I've been noticing things about you that I shouldn't be noticing. Or maybe I should be noticing them, I don't fucking know, I'm so confused." "What kind of things?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He met my eyes and there was something raw in his expression. "Everything, the way you smile when you're working on something you love. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. The way you laugh at my terrible jokes even when they're not funny. The way you just exist in my space and it feels right and I don't want you to leave." And he cut himself off, shaking his head. "I'm not making sense." "You're making sense," I said quietly, even though my heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst out of my chest. "Carter, what are you trying to say?" He looked down at his hands, his jaw working. "I'm trying to say that I think about you all the time. I'm trying to say that I get jealous when you talk about going on dates with other guys. I'm trying to say that I haven't been interested in anyone else in weeks because I'm too busy thinking about you. And I don't know what that means because I'm not. I've never been, he stopped, frustration clear on his face. I've always been straight, Elliot. I've only ever dated women. I've only ever been attracted to women. But then you moved in, and now I don't know what the fuck I am because all I want is to be around you, and I think about touching you, and I almost kissed you last week during that movie, and I don't understand what's happening to me. The confession hung in the air between us. Heavy and charged, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him exactly how I felt, to admit that I'd been fighting these feelings for months, that I wanted the same things he was describing. But another part of me was terrified of what this meant, terrified of fucking up our friendship, terrified of getting my heart broken if this turned out to be just confusion or curiosity on his part. Carter, I said carefully, I need you to be really sure about what you're saying right now, because this isn't something we can take back once we talk about it. He nodded, his eyes intense on mine. I know, and I'm not sure about anything except that I need to figure this out. I need to understand what I'm feeling, and I can't do that without being honest with you. I took a deep breath. Okay, then I'll be honest too. I've had feelings for you for a while now, more than just friendship feelings. And I've been trying to ignore them because you're straight and you're my roommate and I didn't want to make things complicated. His eyes widened slightly. How long? Couple months, I admitted. Maybe longer, it's hard to say exactly when it started. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to lose you as a friend, I said simply. And I didn't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. You're straight, Carter, or you thought you were. And I've been down this road before, catching feelings for a straight friend. It never ends well. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. What if I'm not as straight as I thought I was? Then that's something you need to figure out, I said gently. But I can't be your experiment, Carter. I can't be the guy you explore your sexuality with and then realize you're not actually interested in men after all. That would break me. Honesty in my words seemed to hit him hard. He reached across the table and took my hand, his fingers warm and slightly rough against mine. I would never do that to you, he said firmly. Whatever this is, whatever I'm feeling, it's not just curiosity. It's not me wanting to experiment. It's you, specifically you, and I don't know how to explain it except that you make me feel things I've never felt before. I looked down at our joined hands, my throat tight with emotion. So what do we do? I don't know, he admitted, but I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to keep acting like everything's normal when I'm dying inside every time you're close to me and I can't do anything about it. What do you want to do about it? I asked, looking up at him. His eyes were dark with something I could finally recognize, want, need, maybe even the beginnings of love. I want to see where this goes, he said quietly. I want to figure out what this is between us. And I want to do it honestly, without hiding or pretending, but only if you want that too, only if you're willing to take the risk with me. It was the scariest thing anyone had ever asked me and also the easiest answer I'd ever given. I want that too, I said, but we need to take it slow, okay? We need to figure this out without rushing into anything. He nodded, relief flooding his features. Slow is good, I can do slow. But slow turned out to be harder than either of us anticipated. That night we ended up on the couch again, ostensibly watching a movie but really just existing in the same space, hyper-aware of each other. Carter sat closer than usual and I didn't move away. About halfway through the movie, he shifted and put his arm around my shoulders, pulling me against his side. It felt natural, right, like we'd been doing this for years. I let myself relax into him, resting my head on his shoulder, and I felt him let out a breath he'd been holding. "This okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said, "this is okay." We stayed like that for the rest of the movie, neither of us really watching it, both of us just feeling the warmth of being close, the comfort of finally acknowledging what had been building between us. When the credits rolled, Carter tilted his head down to look at me and I looked up at him, and we were close enough that I could count the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "I really want to kiss you right now," he whispered, his voice rough. My breath caught. "Then why don't you?" "Because I'm scared," he admitted. "I've never done this before, I've never kissed a guy, and I don't want to fuck it up." "You won't fuck it up," I said softly. "There's no wrong way to do this." He swallowed hard, his eyes searching mine. Will you show me?" It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen him, and it made my chest ache. I reached up slowly, giving him plenty of time to change his mind, and cupped his face in my hand. He leaned into the touch, his eyes fluttering closed for a moment. "Just do what feels natural," I whispered. "There's no pressure, no expectations, just us." He opened his eyes, and the look in them was so full of trust and want that it made my heart stutter. Then he closed the distance between us, and his lips met mine in a kiss that was tentative and soft and absolutely perfect. He kissed like someone who was discovering something new and precious, carefully, reverently, with a sweetness that made my eyes sting with unexpected emotion. I kissed him back gently, letting him set the pace, and I felt the moment he relaxed into it, the moment the nervousness gave way to something deeper. His hand came up to tangle in my hair and the kiss deepened slightly, grew more confident. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing hard and Carter's eyes were dark and slightly dazed. Fuck, he breathed. That was. Yeah, I agreed because I didn't have words either. He touched his lips like he was trying to memorize the feeling. I've never felt anything like that before, not with anyone. Good different? I asked, suddenly nervous. Really good different, he said firmly. He pulled me closer and I went willingly, tucking myself against his chest while his arms wrapped around me. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, both of us processing what had just happened. This was real, this was happening, and it was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The next few weeks were like living in a dream. Carter and I started dating, if you could call it that, given that we lived together and had already been spending almost all our time together anyway. But now there was a new dimension to everything. Morning coffee together meant lingering touches and stolen kisses. Movie nights meant cuddling on the couch, my head on his chest, his fingers running through my hair. We'd stay up late talking about everything, his growing feelings, his confusion about his sexuality, his fear of judgment from his family and friends, his excitement about exploring this new part of himself. He was endearingly earnest about all of it, asking questions, wanting to understand not just his own feelings but what it meant to date a man, what it meant to be part of the LGBTQ+ community, how to navigate this new identity he was discovering. I fell more in love with him every day, watching him be so brave and honest about his confusion and his growth. We took things slow physically, just like we'd agreed. Kissing, touching, holding each other, but nothing more, not yet. Carter wanted to be sure, wanted to make sure he wasn't rushing into something before he was ready, and I respected that completely. But there was a tension building between us, a magnetic pull that grew stronger every time we were close. One night, about 3 weeks after our first kiss, we were in his room. We'd been watching a movie on his laptop, sprawled across his bed in a tangle of limbs, and somehow we'd ended up just looking at each other. The movie forgot. "Can I tell you something?" Carter asked quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. "Always," I said. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Actually, I think I've been falling for a while. I just didn't have the words for it before." My breath caught in my throat. "Carter, you don't have to say it back," he rushed to add. "I just needed you to know, I needed to be honest about what I'm feeling." "I'm already there," I said softly. "I've been in love with you for weeks, maybe months." The smile that spread across his face was radiant, transforming his entire expression. He leaned in and kissed me, and this kiss was different from all the ones before, deeper, more intense, filled with all the emotion we'd been holding back. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring months of longing into it, and I felt him respond in kind. His hand slid under my shirt, and I gasped at the contact, at the feel of his warm palms against my skin. "Is this okay?" he asked against my lips. "Yes," I breathed. "God, yes." Things escalated quickly after that. Clothes started coming off. Hands explored new territory, and the tension that had been building for weeks finally found release. Carter was nervous. I could feel it in the slight tremor of his hands, in the way he'd pause sometimes to make sure I was still okay with what was happening. But he was also eager, responsive, fully present in every moment. I'd never felt so connected to anyone, so completely seen and wanted. We spent the next 3 hours tangled together in his bed, exploring each other with a mixture of tenderness and passion that left me breathless. Carter was attentive in a way that surprised me, constantly checking in, asking if things felt good, adjusting based on my reactions. And when we finally collapsed against each other, exhausted and sated, he held me close like he was afraid I might disappear. "You okay?" I asked, running my fingers through his hair. "More than okay," he said, his voice rough. "That was fuck, Elliot. I've never felt anything like that." "Yeah," he nodded, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "I didn't know it could be like that, so intense, so right." We lay there in comfortable silence for a while, both of us processing what had just happened. But as the adrenaline faded and reality started seeping back in, I felt Carter tense beside me. "What's wrong?" I asked, propping myself up on one elbow to look at him. He was staring at the ceiling, his expression troubled. "Nothing's wrong, I'm thinking." "About?" He was quiet for a moment, and I felt a flicker of anxiety in my chest. "About everything, about what this means, about what happens next." "What do you mean?" He sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I mean, this changes everything, doesn't it? I can't go back to pretending I'm straight. I can't just ignore this and go back to how things were." "You don't have to," I said carefully, sitting up beside him. "Carter, we can figure this out together." "Can we?" he asked, and there was something raw in his voice. "Because Elliot, I'm not ready for this to be public. I'm not ready to tell people. My family, my friends from home, my coworkers, they all think I'm straight. They've always known me as straight, and I don't know how to explain this to them. I don't even fully understand it myself." My stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need time," he said, finally looking at me. I need time to process this to figure out what it means for my identity before I can share it with the world. And I know that's not fair to you. It's okay to need time, I interrupted gently. Coming out is personal and it's on your timeline. I'm not going to pressure you to do anything before you're ready. Relief flooded his face. Really, you're okay with keeping this between us for now? As long as you need, I assured him. But Carter, we need to communicate about this. We need to talk about what we're comfortable with, what our boundaries are so nobody gets hurt. He nodded, pulling me close again. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for being patient with me while I figure this out. I kissed his shoulder, pushing down the small voice of worry that had started whispering in the back of my mind. This was fine. This was normal. Carter just needed time to adjust to his new understanding of himself, and I could give him that. Everything would be fine. Except it wasn't fine. Over the next few weeks, a pattern started to emerge that I couldn't ignore. Behind closed doors in our apartment, Carter was affectionate, attentive, everything I could ask for in a partner. He'd kiss me goodbye in the mornings before work, pull me into his arms when we were cooking dinner together, whisper sweet things in my ear that made my heart race. But the moment we stepped outside our apartment, or the moment anyone else was around, he became distant. Not cold exactly, but definitely just roommates level of interaction. No touching beyond friendly shoulder pats, no lingering looks, nothing that might indicate we were anything more than friends sharing an apartment. At first, I told myself it was understandable. He was still figuring himself out, still working through years of assuming he was straight. Of course, he needed time to be comfortable with public displays of affection. But it started to wear on me, especially when his friends would come over. Carter had a close group of guys he'd known since college, and they'd drop by occasionally for gaming sessions or to watch sports. When they were around, Carter wouldn't even sit next to me on the couch. He'd laugh at their jokes about women, participate in conversations about which actresses were hot, act like the straight guy they'd always known. And I'd sit there watching him perform straightness, feeling like a secret he was ashamed of. The breaking point came about 6 weeks into our relationship. Carter's best friend from college, Ryan, was visiting Portland for work and wanted to meet up. Carter suggested we all grab dinner together, me, him, and Ryan. I thought it might be a good sign that maybe Carter was starting to feel comfortable enough to have me around his friends in a more meaningful way. But at dinner, Carter introduced me as my roommate Elliot, and spent the entire meal talking to Ryan about their college days, girls they'd dated, parties they'd been to. I barely existed in the conversation except as a polite participant who'd occasionally be asked a surface-level question. Watching Carter laugh and joke with Ryan, seeing him be so at ease in his straight identity, something cracked inside me. Because I realized that I wasn't just waiting for him to be ready to come out publicly. I was waiting for him to be willing to acknowledge that what we had was real, even if it was just between us and the people closest to us. After Ryan left and we were walking back to our apartment, I was quiet. Carter noticed. "You okay? You were kind of quiet at dinner. Can we talk when we get home?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Sure," he said, and I could hear the worry creeping into his tone. "Did I do something wrong?" I didn't answer until we were back in our apartment, door closed, safe in our bubble. Then I turned to face him. "Do you think Ryan would stop being your friend if he knew about us?" Carter's expression shuddered. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I'm trying to understand where the line is," I said. "I'm trying to understand if you're just not ready to be publicly out or if you're actually ashamed of what we have." "I'm not ashamed," he said immediately, but there was something defensive in his tone. "Then why do you act like you're every time someone else is around?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why do you introduce me as your roommate and nothing more? Why do you talk about women like you're still interested in dating them? Why do I feel like I have to hide who I am to you when anyone else is in the room?" "That's not fair," Carter said, frustration bleeding into his voice. "You knew I wasn't ready to be public about this. You said you understood." "I do understand not being ready to be publicly out," I said. "But this is different, Carter. This isn't about making a big announcement or telling your whole family. This is about acknowledging to yourself and to the people closest to you that what we have is real, that I'm not just some experiment you're keeping secret." "You're not an experiment," he said firmly. "Then stop treating me like one," I shot back, and my voice cracked slightly. "Stop acting like you can have two separate lives, the one where you're with me behind closed doors and the one where you're straight Carter to everyone else." The fight escalated from there, both of us saying things we didn't quite mean, both of us hurt and defensive and scared. Carter accused me of not being patient enough, of not understanding how hard this was for him. I accused him of wanting to have his cake and eat it too, of wanting the emotional and physical connection with me without having to do any of the hard work of accepting his own identity. It was brutal and painful, and it ended with Carter storming into his room and slamming the door, leaving me standing in the living room with tears streaming down my face. Continue 12 a.m. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the fight over and over in my mind. Was I being unfair? Was I asking too much? Carter was still figuring things out, still navigating a fundamental shift in how he understood himself. Maybe I needed to be more patient, more understanding. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt before by straight boys who wanted me in private but not in public, was screaming that this wasn't okay. That I deserved better than being someone's secret. That love shouldn't require me to make myself smaller to hide who I was. To pretend that the most important relationship in my life didn't exist whenever other people were around. The next morning, Carter knocked on my door early. I'd barely slept and I knew I looked like hell, but I opened the door anyway. He looked equally exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded and stepped aside. He sat on the edge of my bed and I leaned against my desk, maintaining some distance between us. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I'm so fucking sorry, Elliot. You were right about everything." I waited, not trusting my voice. "I've been trying to have it both ways," he continued, looking down at his hands. "I've been wanting the relationship with you while still holding on to the safety of being perceived as straight. And that's not fair to you. It's not fair to us, and it's not honest." "What changed?" I asked quietly. "I spent all night thinking about what you said, and I realized that I've been so focused on what I might lose if people know I'm not straight that I haven't been thinking about what I'm already losing by hiding. I'm losing you, Elliot. I'm losing your trust, your patience, maybe even your love, and that's not worth any amount of comfort or safety." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I'm not asking you to come out to everyone tomorrow, Carter. I'm really not. I just need to know that you're not ashamed of us, that you're working toward a place where you can be honest about who you are and what we mean to each other." "I'm not ashamed," he said firmly, looking up at me with intense sincerity in his eyes. "I've never been ashamed of you or of us. I've been scared. I've been scared of disappointing people, of being judged, of losing relationships that matter to me, but I'm more scared of losing you." He stood up and crossed the room to me, taking my hands in his. "I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do the work I need to do to be comfortable with this part of myself. And I'm going to be honest with the people in my life about who I am and who I love. But I need you to be patient with me while I get there. Can you do that?" I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation. All I saw was sincerity and love and a determination I'd never seen before. "Yes," I said softly. "I can do that, but Carter, I need you to communicate with me. I need you to tell me when you're struggling instead of just pulling away. And I need you to take concrete steps toward being more open, even if it's just small ones, because I can't be in a relationship where I'm a secret indefinitely." "I know," he said, "and I will, I promise." He pulled me into his arms and I let myself sink into his embrace, feeling some of the tension from the past few weeks finally start to ease. We stood there for a long time, just holding each other, both of us understanding that we'd crossed a threshold. This wasn't going to be easy. There would be more fights, more struggles, more moments of doubt, but maybe, just maybe, we could figure it out together. True to his word, Carter started making changes. Small ones at first, but meaningful ones. He started seeing a therapist who specialized in LGBTQ+ issues, working through his internalized fears and his complicated feelings about his identity. He started reading books and articles about sexuality and coming out, educating himself instead of expecting me to do all the emotional labor. And most importantly, he started being more open with people about us. It started with his coworker and friend Maya, who Carter had always been close with. He told her about us over coffee one afternoon, and according to him, she'd been completely supportive, even a little surprised that it had taken him so long to figure himself out. That small victory gave him confidence. Next was his sister Emma, who he was close with despite the distance. She lived back in his hometown in Michigan. He called her one evening and I stayed in my room to give him privacy, my heart pounding as I waited to hear how it went. When he came to find me an hour later, his eyes were red but he was smiling. "She's happy for me," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "She said she just wants me to be happy, and if you make me happy then she already loves you." Each person Carter told, each small act of honesty seemed to lighten a weight on his shoulders. And I started to see the real Carter emerge, not the version of himself he'd been performing for years, but the authentic person underneath. He was lighter, more relaxed, more fully himself. 2 months after our big fight, Carter asked me to go with him to a LGBTQ+ community event in Portland, a casual outdoor gathering with food trucks and live music. It would be the first time we'd be out together as a couple in a public space, and I could tell he was nervous. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready," I told him as we were getting ready to leave. "I'm ready," he said, though I could see his hands shaking slightly as he tied his shoes. "I want to do this. I want to be seen with you. I want to stop hiding." At the event, Carter was tentative at first, keeping a careful distance between us. But as the afternoon went on and he saw other couples, men holding hands, women with their arms around each other, people just existing openly and happily, something shifted in him. He reached for my hand as we were walking between food trucks, threading his fingers through mine. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. I looked at him and he was looking back at me with a small, nervous smile. "Okay?" he asked. "More than okay," I said, squeezing his hand. We spent the rest of the afternoon like that, hand in hand, and every time I looked at Carter he seemed a little more relaxed, a little more comfortable in his own skin. We ran into a few people we knew from around the neighborhood, and Carter didn't let go of my hand when he introduced me. Not as his roommate, but as his boyfriend. Each time he said it, I fell a little more in love with him. That evening after we got home from the event, Carter was buzzing with a mixture of excitement and relief. We ordered takeout and sprawled on the couch, and he couldn't stop talking about how good it felt to be public about us, how much lighter he felt not having to monitor every interaction or worry about who might see us together. "I was so scared," he admitted, his head resting on my shoulder. "I was convinced that the moment I was open about being with a guy, everything would fall apart. But it didn't. People were just normal, happy for us even. Most people just want the people they care about to be happy," I said, running my fingers through his hair. "And you deserve to be happy, Carter. You deserve to be yourself without apology." He tilted his head up to look at me, his hazel eyes soft. "I am happy, happier than I've ever been, and that's because of you." "It's because of you too," I said. "You did the work, you faced your fears, you chose honesty over comfort. That takes incredible courage." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of gratitude. When we pulled apart, he settled back against me and we sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying being together. "I want to tell my parents," he said suddenly. I tensed slightly. Carter's parents were traditional, conservative, and very involved in their church back in Michigan. He'd been dreading telling them more than anyone else. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I think so," he said. "I mean, I'm terrified. They're not going to react well, at least not at first, but I don't want to keep this huge part of my life from them anymore. And I want them to know about you. Even if they don't understand right away, I want them to know that you're important to me. I'll support you however you need me to," I said. "Whether that means being there when you tell them or giving you space to do it alone or anything in between." "I think I need to do it alone," he said. "But knowing you're here, knowing I have you to come back to no matter how it goes, that makes it possible." He called them the following weekend. I made myself scarce, going to a coffee shop to work on some freelance projects and give him privacy. But I was on edge the entire time, checking my phone constantly, worried about how he was doing. After about 2 hours, he texted me, "It's done, come home." I practically ran back to our apartment. When I got there, Carter was sitting on the couch, looking drained but oddly calm. I sat down next to him and took his hand. "How did it go?" "About as well as I expected," he said with a weak smile. "My dad was quiet, disappointed. My mom cried. They asked if I was sure if this was just a phase, all the usual stuff. They said they needed time to process, that they still love me but they don't understand. They want me to pray about it, to talk to their pastor." My heart ached for him. "So sorry." "It's okay," he said, though his eyes were shiny with unshed tears. "I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I told them the truth. I told them I'm bisexual, that I'm in a relationship with a man, that I'm happy. And I told them I hope they can accept me, but that I'm not going to hide who I am anymore." "I'm so proud of you," I said, pulling him close. He let out a shaky breath and buried his face in my shoulder. "They asked about you. They wanted to know your name, what you do, how we met. So at least they're curious, even if they're not ready to accept it yet." Next few months weren't easy. Carter's parents kept their distance, and while they didn't cut him off completely, things were strained. His dad would have brief surface-level phone conversations with him, but they never talked about anything real. His mom sent the occasional text, but there was an obvious sadness in her messages, like she was mourning the version of her son she thought she knew. It was painful to watch Carter navigate that grief, but he handled it with a maturity and grace that amazed me. He gave them space but didn't apologize for who he was. He continued to reach out, to send updates about his life, to invite them to stay connected even if it was hard. And slowly, painfully slowly, things started to shift. His mom started asking more questions, careful, hesitant questions about me, about our life together. His dad started having slightly longer conversations. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was movement in the right direction. Meanwhile, Carter continued to become more comfortable with himself. He joined an LGBTQ+ social group in Portland, made friends who understood his experience of coming out later in life. He started using the label bisexual with confidence, educating friends who had questions, speaking up when people made assumptions about sexuality, and our relationship deepened. We weren't just two people who'd fallen for each other, we were partners who'd weathered a storm together and come out stronger for it. One evening, about 8 months after we'd started dating, we were cooking dinner together. Carter was attempting to make his grandmother's pasta recipe, and I was helping by chopping vegetables and providing moral support. Music was playing in the background, something indie and mellow, and the kitchen was filled with the smell of garlic and tomatoes. It was perfectly ordinary and perfectly perfect. Carter looked over at me, and there was something in his expression that made me pause. What? I asked, smiling. I just love you, he said simply. I love this, I love us, I love that we can just exist together like this, cooking dinner and being stupidly domestic, and it's the best part of my day. Mine too, I said, my heart full. He set down the spoon he'd been using to stir sauce and crossed the kitchen to me, cupping my face in his hands. I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for pushing me when I needed to be pushed and for giving me grace when I was struggling. Thank you for loving me through all of it. You made it easy, I said, covering his hands with mine. You did the work, Carter. You chose growth over comfort, honesty over hiding. That's all you. We're a good team, he said, kissing me softly. Yeah, we are, I agreed. As we went back to cooking, I thought about how far we'd come. From that first night when Carter admitted he had feelings he didn't understand, to this moment of simple, comfortable domesticity. It hadn't been a straight line. There had been fights and doubts and painful growing pains. But we'd made it through together, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of our story. The real turning point with Carter's parents came unexpectedly 9 months into our relationship. It was early December, and Carter had been debating whether to go home for Christmas. He wanted to see his sister and other family members, but he didn't know if he could handle the strain of being around his parents for several days. We'd been talking about it for weeks, weighing options, when his phone rang one evening. It was his mom. Carter answered hesitantly, putting her on speaker so I could hear. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice was warm, warmer than it had been in months. I'm calling because your father and I have been talking, and we want you to come home for Christmas, and we want you to bring Elliot. Carter's eyes widened in shock. You, what? We want to meet him, she said, and I could hear emotion in her voice. We've been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of praying, and we've realized that we've been approaching this all wrong. You're our son and we love you, and if Elliot makes you happy, then we want to know him. We want to welcome him into our family. Carter's hand was shaking as he held the phone. Mom, are you sure? I don't want this to be something you're forcing yourself to do. We're sure, she said firmly. It hasn't been easy, Carter, I won't lie to you. We've had to challenge a lot of our beliefs and assumptions, but at the end of the day, you're more important than any of that. Your happiness is more important, and we don't want to lose you. Tears were streaming down Carter's face now. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come home, she said. Say you'll bring Elliot. Say you'll give us a chance to do better. Carter looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded, my own throat tight with emotion. We'll come, Carter said. We'll be there for Christmas. After they hung up, Carter pulled me into his arms and held me tight. He was shaking, crying, laughing all at once. I can't believe that just happened, he said. I can't believe they want to meet you. They want to know the person who makes their son happy, I said, running my hand soothingly down his back. That's huge, Carter. That's everything. I'm terrified, he admitted. What if it's awkward? What if they're just saying they want to try but they can't actually do it? Then we handle it together, I said, but I have a feeling it's going to be okay. They're reaching out, Carter, they're trying, that's all you can ask for. The trip to Michigan for Christmas was nerve-wracking. The entire flight, Carter was jittery, going over every possible scenario, coaching me on his family dynamics, apologizing in advance for anything that might go wrong. I kept reassuring him that it would be fine, but internally I was nervous too. I'd never met a boyfriend's parents before where the context was the boyfriend coming out. This was uncharted territory for both of us. Carter's mom, Linda, picked us up from the airport. She was a petite woman in her mid-50s with the same hazel eyes as Carter, and when she saw us, she hesitated for just a moment before pulling Carter into a fierce hug. I'm so glad you're home, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Then she turned to me and extended her hand. Elliot, it's so nice to finally meet you. It's nice to meet you too, Mrs. Mitchell, I said, shaking her hand. Please call me Linda, she said with a small smile. The drive to their house was filled with careful small talk, Linda asking about our flight, about Portland, about the weather. Nothing deep but nothing cold either. When we got to the house, Carter's dad, Tom, was waiting in the driveway. He was a tall man with graying hair and a reserved demeanor, and he looked nervous as we got out of the car. He hugged Carter, holding on a little longer than usual, then turned to me. Elliot, he said, extending his hand. Welcome to our home. Thank you for having me, sir, I said, shaking his hand firmly. The first evening was admittedly awkward. We all tiptoed around the elephant in the room, talking about surface-level things, the decorations, dinner preparations, what movies were playing in theaters. Carter's sister Emma arrived with her husband, and she immediately broke some of the tension by pulling me aside and whispering, "Thank God you're here. My brother hasn't shut up about you for months, and I was dying to meet the person who's made him so happy." Having Emma and her husband there helped. They were warm and welcoming, asking me questions about my work, my interests, treating me like family. And slowly over the course of that evening, I watched Carter's parents start to relax. The real breakthrough came on Christmas Eve. We were all sitting in the living room after dinner, a fire crackling in the fireplace, Christmas music playing softly. Carter's mom was asking me about my family, and I was telling her about my parents, how they'd been supportive when I came out, how they'd love to meet Carter sometime. And then she said something that surprised me. "I owe you an apology, Elliot. When Carter first told us about you, about his sexuality, I reacted poorly. I let my fear and my limited understanding get in the way of supporting my son. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for the months I wasted being close-minded when I could have been getting to know the person who makes my son so happy." I was taken aback by her honesty. "I appreciate you saying that, Linda, but I think what matters most is that you're here now and you're trying. That means everything to Carter. He's my baby," she said, her eyes getting teary. And I almost lost him because I was too stubborn to see past my own preconceptions. "I'm not going to make that mistake again." Carter, who'd been sitting next to me, took my hand and squeezed it. His dad cleared his throat. "I want to say something too," Tom said, and everyone turned to look at him. He'd been mostly quiet all evening, and this was the most he'd spoken since we'd arrived. "Carter, I owe you an apology as well. I've spent the past several months praying and thinking and trying to reconcile my beliefs with the reality of who you are. And I realized that my job as your father isn't to judge you or to try to change you. My job is to love you and support you, period. So I'm sorry for not doing that from the beginning. And Elliot," he turned to me, "thank you for taking care of my son. Thank you for being patient with our family while we figured our shit out." The rest of the evening was filled with tears and hugs and healing conversations. Carter's parents asked questions, real questions, not confrontational ones, about our relationship, about how we'd met, about what our life in Portland was like. They wanted to understand, and that willingness to try meant everything. That night, as Carter and I were getting ready for bed in his childhood bedroom, his parents had insisted we stay in the same room, which felt like a significant gesture. He pulled me close. "I can't believe that just happened," he said. "I can't believe how well it went." "Your parents love you," I said simply. "They just needed time to figure out how to show it." "I love you so much," he said, kissing me softly. "I love you too," I whispered back, "now and always." The rest of the Christmas visit was warm and happy. We helped Linda cook Christmas dinner, played board games with the family, went to see Emma's kids' holiday concert. And through it all, Carter's parents treated us like any other couple, natural, warm, inclusive. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of adjustment, times when I could tell they were working to overcome years of conditioning. But they were trying, and that's all that mattered. We flew back to Portland after New Year's, both of us exhausted but happy. On the flight home, Carter held my hand openly, not caring who saw. "Thank you for coming with me," he said. "Thank you for being willing to meet my family, even though you had no idea how it would go." "They're your family," I said, "and they're good people who love you. I'm glad I got to meet them, and I'm glad they're making the effort." "It's because of you," he said. "They saw how happy I am with you, and that made them want to understand." "It's because of you," I corrected. "You've been patient and honest with them, and you gave them the space to grow. That's all you, Carter." He smiled and leaned his head on my shoulder. "When we get home, I want to talk about something." "Okay," I said, curious. "What about the future?" he said. "Our future." My heart skipped a beat. "I'm listening." "Not here," he said. "When we get home, when we can talk properly." The rest of the flight, I was buzzing with anticipation and curiosity. What did he want to talk about? Were we moving too fast, not fast enough? Was something wrong? But when I looked at Carter, he just seemed happy, content, not worried at all. When we finally got back to our apartment, we dropped our bags and collapsed on the couch, both of us travel-weary. But Carter sat up, taking my hand in his expression serious but warm. "So I wanted to talk to you about something I've been thinking about for a while," he started. "We've been together for almost a year now, and it's been the best year of my life. You've changed everything for me, Elliot. You've helped me discover parts of myself I didn't know existed. You've been patient while I figured out my identity. You've stood by me through all the hard stuff with my family. And I wake up every day grateful that you're in my life." "Carter," I started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know we're still young, and I know we've only been together for a year. But I also know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I'm not saying we need to get married tomorrow or even next year. But I want you to know that this is it for me, you're it for me, and I want us to start building a future together, really building it, not just living day to day." My eyes were stinging with tears. "What does that look like for you?" "I don't know exactly," he admitted. Maybe we start by finding a place that's ours, not my apartment that you moved into, but a home we choose together. Maybe we travel, see the world, have adventures. Maybe we get a dog. Maybe eventually we talk about marriage if that's something you want. I just know that whatever our future looks like, I want to build it with you. I was crying now, full on crying, and I didn't care. I want that too, I said. I want all of that. I want to build a life with you, Carter. I want the mundane and the extraordinary, the easy days and the hard ones. I want all of it as long as it's with you. He pulled me into his arms and we held each other for a long moment, both of us crying happy tears, both of us feeling the weight and the joy of the commitment we were making to each other. I love you, he whispered into my hair. I love you so much. I love you too, I said, more than I ever thought possible. We spent the rest of the evening talking about our dreams, our plans, our hopes for the future. And as I listened to Carter talk about the life he wanted to build with me, I felt a profound sense of peace and rightness. This was it. This was the person I was meant to find. And all the uncertainty, all the struggle, all the painful growth we'd both gone through, it had led us here to this moment, to this perfect understanding that we were choosing each other, not just for now, but forever. 6 months later, we moved into our new apartment in early summer. It was a beautiful two-bedroom place in a neighborhood we both loved, with big windows and a small balcony where we could have morning coffee. The second bedroom became my office/art studio, and Carter helped me set it up, painting the walls the exact shade of blue I wanted, hanging shelves, making it perfect. We adopted a rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever mix named Murphy, who Carter fell instantly in love with. Watching Carter play with Murphy in the park, seeing him laugh as the dog bounded through the grass, I'd feel my heart swell with so much love I could barely contain it. We settled into our life together, working, cooking, exploring Portland, hosting dinner parties with friends. Carter was fully out now, comfortable in his identity as a bisexual man, active in the LGBTQ+ community. He'd even become something of a mentor to other people who were coming out later in life, sharing his story and offering support. His relationship with his parents continued to improve. They came to visit us in Portland, met Murphy, saw our home together. Linda even pulled me aside during their visit and told me I was part of their family now, that they considered me another son. It meant more than I could express. One evening in late fall, almost a year and a half after we'd first got together, Carter and I were walking Murphy along the waterfront at sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air had that crisp autumn chill that made everything feel sharp and clear. Carter was quieter than usual, and when I asked if he was okay, he just smiled and said he was thinking. We found a bench overlooking the water and sat down, Murphy curling up at our feet. Carter took my hand, threading his fingers through mine. "You know what I was thinking about?" he asked. "Tell me." "I was thinking about that first night when I told you I was confused about my feelings, when everything changed between us." "I remember," I said softly. "I was terrified that night," he admitted. "Terrified of what it meant, terrified of losing your friendship, terrified of facing this part of myself I'd never acknowledged before, but you made it safe. You made it possible for me to be honest, to explore, to figure myself out, and I'm so grateful for that." "You did the same for me," I said. "You showed me what it looks like to choose love over fear, to be brave enough to be yourself even when it's hard." He turned to face me fully, and there was something in his expression that made my breath catch. "Elliot Hayes, you are the best thing that's ever happened to me. You're my best friend, my partner, the person I want to wake up next to every single day for the rest of my life. And I know I said we didn't need to rush into anything, but I don't want to wait anymore." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "I want to marry you," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant silver band. "I want to make this official, make it permanent. I want to stand in front of everyone we love and say that you're mine and I'm yours. Will you marry me?" I was crying again, tears streaming down my face, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, I managed to nod and whisper, "Yes, God, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on my finger, and then he was kissing me and I was kissing him back, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. Murphy, sensing the excitement, jumped up and started barking, wagging his tail frantically. "I love you," Carter said against my lips. "I love you so much." "I love you too," I said, "always." As we sat there on that bench, watching the sun set over the water, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From that first moment of confusion and fear, through all the struggles and growth and painful honesty, to this perfect moment of commitment and joy. It hadn't been easy. There had been times when I'd wondered if we'd make it, times when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. But we'd faced everything together and we'd come out stronger for it, because that's what real love is. It's choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. It's growing together instead of growing apart. It's being brave enough to be vulnerable, honest enough to face difficult truths, and patient enough to let each other figure things out. And as I looked at the man beside me, my best friend, my love, my future husband, I knew with absolute certainty that we'd keep choosing each other every single day for the rest of our lives. The end. Thank you so much for reading our story, Red. If Carter and Elliot's journey touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support means everything and helps us share more beautiful love stories like this one. Drop a comment below and tell us, what was your favorite moment in the story? Should we create a part 2 showing Carter and Elliot's wedding and married life? What kind of LGBTQ plus love story would you like to see next? Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional journey. Remember, love is love and every person deserves to live authentically and find their happy ending. If you're struggling with your identity or feelings, know that you're not alone and it gets better. Red Heart Rainbow. See you in the next story, Two Hearts.